Just as we're moving on, we've talked a fair bit about, like, the focus has been methane, but there are other things in the game as well. And I suppose we can nearly call you the regular wise man of the tribe, Charles, at this point, is Charles Lee from Pittencherry. He's graced us with his wisdom at most of the forums we've run. And I've just asked Charles to paint a bit more of a picture about what the future fuel mix might look like, and discuss around the topics that we're on today. So over to you, Charles, from Pittencherry.
Thanks, Jock, and thanks again for organising these events. It's always good to be part of it. I'm not too sure about the resident wise man. I think I'll let someone else have that mantle. But yeah, definitely great to do these, especially because we're really coming up to a generational change in how energy is produced, distributed, and used around the world. And this health crisis that we're in will only accelerate the transition as governments around the world invest in new low-carbon technologies in the post-pandemic recovery. The pressure to reduce carbon introduces a lot of risks, but in the same token, it introduces a lot of opportunities as well that we can take advantage of to make Australia the food bowl of the world. My name is Charles, and I'm the Associate Energy Engineer at Pittencherry. Over the last few years, I've had the pleasure of working alongside farmers across Australia to improve the energy productivity of their operations. My team and I have looked into everything from automated irrigation systems to thermal storage in dairy farms to biogas generation using farm waste. Our focus in doing all this is to find a pathway for farms to effectively utilize technology to increase their profitability and sustainability. And it's through this work that I've come to see how close we actually are in replacing diesel use on farm. Today, we'll explore some of the key developments in alternative fuels that have enabled them to be a contender to replace diesel, as well as some of the new ways to deploy renewable energy generation that might suit your farm. So the Australian agriculture sector is trending towards carbon neutrality by 2030, as James said earlier in the day, and according to the National Farmers Federation roadmap. And by 2050, the carbon market could be providing about $40 billion in income to the land sector. So the agri sector will not only be carbon neutral, but it will also help offset the carbon content of other industries as well. In a carbon neutral future, diesel tractors will be completely replaced by methane, electric, or hydrogen powered vehicles. Diesel pumps can be replaced by electric pumps driven by solar during the day and batteries at night. And there will be little reliance on grid electricity, as you'll be generating most of this on farm using wind or solar. The first step towards this carbon neutrality is to start thinking about the changes that we can make today. Thinking about the transition now would allow us to respond to the shifts in the market as people put more value on carbon, as opposed to being caught by surprise. Hopefully, I can show you some of these alternative fuels and energy sources that you can keep in mind when you plan your transition to this carbon neutral future. So the use of alternative fuels on farms deliver more than just environmental benefits. It also addresses two pressing problems: the current cost of fuel and the lost potential revenues from farm waste. So the high cost of diesel fuel can be minimized through using renewable fuels produced locally and ideally right on your properties. The dollars spent on getting diesel delivered from a refinery in Singapore to your farm can be productively invested back into the business. Given the right circumstances, these energy initiatives can be economically sustainable and feasible. The second issue is that the value of organic waste produced on farm isn't realized at the moment. This doesn't have to be the case, as waste can potentially be a good quality feedstock, not only for biogas, but other biofuels as well. So the primary biofuels that I'll talk about today is biodiesel, bioethanol, and of course, biogas. But do keep in mind that the feasibility of these solutions will depend on your situation, and we'll go through some of the key requirements for these technologies to work for you in a cost-effective way. So biodiesel is a fuel with similar properties to diesel. It's made largely out of vegetable oils, which could be sourced from waste from restaurants and food processors, or grown directly as a fuel crop. If you can secure a supply of cheap waste vegetable oils, then biodiesel could be a very feasible solution, as the processes involved is not overly complex. The equipment to produce biodiesel can range from backyard chemistry kits that you can buy online for about 20K, all the way to building dedicated refineries. Now, a key advantage of biodiesel is that it can be used directly in most diesel engines if blended with regular diesel. So it's a very good fuel. It's a very good fuel to start your journey to reducing your reliance on diesel without the need to replace every asset. This makes it a good first step to carbon neutrality while we wait for other technologies to develop. We also worked on a project recently looking at the potential for a canola farm in Victoria to use some of the oil production to make biodiesel for themselves. And we found that the tipping point of when you can start making your own diesel and when that it's going to become profitable compared to selling the oil directly is about $1 per litre of canola oil. Now, last time I checked, the price of canola oil is about $1.20 per litre. So it's not quite there yet to make your own biodiesel on farm. However, this tipping point doesn't factor in any potential government funding for the equipment costs or any potential carbon value in the reduced diesel consumption. So I think there's definitely situations where biodiesel is a strong potential to supply a portion of the community's diesel needs. Bioethanol is another type of biofuel, and it's an alcohol that's produced from the fermentation of biomass. This primarily uses waste products from food processing, such as wheat starch or molasses. However, it can produce from dedicated fuel crops, such as sugar beets as well. Now, this is a very useful fuel for petrol replacements, and all the E10 petrol that we see at the moment contains about 10% bioethanol. So we already use it. Most of our bioethanol is produced in Nowra, New South Wales, and you can see the scale of the plants required there in that picture. Countries like Brazil have done a very good job at converting most of the transport sector to run off a 85% bioethanol mix. At the moment, on-farm applications of bioethanol is limited to just petrol replacement use, although there is increasing demand for sustainably produced ethanol in other industries. So the need for dedicated fuel crops is rising as well. We've spoken a lot about biogas today, and its importance in agriculture really can't be understated. The technology is very well understood. There's tremendous environmental and energy benefits, and there's growing financial support available for their construction and operation as well. For piggeries and large dairies, this has been demonstrated to provide strong financial returns, and the use cases for this technology will expand as we put a price on carbon. ARENA, the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, has just announced funding for a large-scale feasibility study to look at a community-scale biogas project in the Nowra region of New South Wales. And the plan there is to connect effluent ponds of several large dairies there and channel all the waste to a single location for anaerobic digestion. The biogas can be used to feed electricity back into the local network to stabilize it a bit more. And the fertilizer can be used back on the dairy farms. So it's a very exciting technology that can work for a wide variety of farms. In addition to biofuels, we also need to use renewable electricity. And this can be done to power pumps and supplement the farm's electricity demand. Having a source of renewable electricity can also reduce the farm's operating cost and allow for more aspects of the farm to be electrified as you rely less and less on your grid connection. Solar PV systems are commonly deployed in both small and large scales across Australia and is highly effective if you can use all the electricity on site. As energy storage technologies reduce in price, however, we will start seeing larger and larger systems to be installed in the future. Portable solar systems are becoming available, as you can see in this picture, where a telehandler can just drag out a whole row of arrays, and are useful if you can't build any permanent infrastructure on your property, or you need to move the system every 5 years or so to power different parts of your farm. From what I've seen, these systems are now at cost parity with standard ground-mounted systems. Another renewable source of electricity is wind power. Wind farms are more expensive to set up per kilowatts of capacity compared to solar, but has a higher capacity factor than solar if placed in the correct areas. In terms of cost to generate energy over the lifetime of the wind turbine, a well-designed system located in a suitable area will provide electricity at cheaper rates than solar PV. So an interesting benefit that I found from the use of wind turbines is that early research suggests they can actually help improve crop growth. They're saying that as air is churned up by the blades, it helps mixes the carbon dioxide content from the higher layers with the layers at the plant, giving them more carbon dioxide to grow. And the churning of air also slows down air speeds, which minimizes temperature fluctuations around the crops and also reduces dew on the plants, therefore reducing the risk of disease. So who knows, maybe farms of the future might stick one of these up instead of scarecrows. So one of the main problems though with small-scale renewable energy is that the resource is not always available. This necessitates the need to store the energy in another form so it can be used at any time. One way to do this is in the form of green hydrogen, which Dr. New Thompson will cover in greater detail in his presentation, so definitely stick around for that. Green hydrogen is made by using renewable electricity to split water molecules into hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. The hydrogen can then be pressurized and stored for use as a fuel in fuel cell vehicles and tractors. An alternative to hydrogen-powered vehicles would be to use renewable electricity that we generate to charge batteries in electric-powered tractors and vehicles. Now, over the past 10 years, the demand for batteries has exploded with an increase in electric vehicles around the world. This has led to precipitous drops in price, as you can see here in this graph, where the price between 2010 and 2018 for batteries has dropped over 85%. And the good news for us is that the price is continuing to fall as more and more manufacturers enter the market and reach economies of scale in production. This is a big change and is enabling technologies to be used in applications far more effectively. So what this means for the agri sector is that battery-powered tractors are a reality. John Deere made one back in 2016, and that's it right there, to this fully autonomous GPS-guided electric compact tractor unveiled in Japan in January this year. And there's also this family-friendly electric tractor from New Holland, I think. Ben might be able to talk a bit more about it if you ask him. However, with increased electrification comes increased reliance on the grid. One growing problem that we'll face is that there will be more strain on the electricity grid due to increased loads from electric vehicles, as well as more intense natural disasters. This was what we saw, or this is what the Australian energy market operator saw in the last summer during the bushfires, when our grid was pushed to its limits. One way to address this reliability issue is, and a way to integrate all these technologies that I've spoken about, is through the use of a microgrid. This is an exciting area of development where communities can essentially ring fence their immediate electrical infrastructure, allowing everyone within the microgrid ecosystem to generate, store, and share their energy resources between each other. This allows the system to disconnect from the main grid should a fault occur there as well, which greatly improves reliability and resilience of energy supply within the microgrid. Now, in a fully integrated system, your community microgrid would have rooftop solar, solar and wind farms, and biogas generators providing for all their energy needs of the immediate community. Electricity can be used to convert water to hydrogen, fats to biodiesel, starch to bioethanol, and almost all organic waste will be used for energy generation. If you have excess solar power, then you're free to sell this directly to someone else within the community who needs it, and vice versa. There's still a lot of work though that needs to be done around the legal and regulatory challenges of this type of project to make it accessible to everyone. But we aren't too far off from being able to realize this vision. There's significant work being carried out by Queensland Farmers Federation, for example, with partners like Reaqua, around the use of microgrids in agriculture and how that can reduce costs for farms. There's also a large $110 million microgrid project that's being built in Western Australia to provide stable, reliable, and renewable power to a remote gold mine and its surrounding community. So my main takeaways from this, I suppose, is to start thinking about the different waste streams that's available to you. Do you have a large volume of organic waste and issues with disposing this? Making your own biogas may be the answer. Are you near a food processing plant that produces a lot of fats as a waste? Maybe talk to them about biodiesel and using that on farm. Also consider electrification of your diesel use. It might not be immediately feasible, but we do need to keep our eyes open for when the opportunity does arrive. Batteries are on the cusp of being able to replace diesel use if powered by renewables, and things are changing quickly in the energy space. So now is as good a time as any to start planning your carbon neutral future. And thanks for listening.
Now, Charles, we have a comment from Liz in the chat box that says Steve Hobbs used to produce biodiesel for his on-farm use from his canola crop in Caniva, Victoria, but it wasn't going to be profitable to sell it off-farm due to the high costs involved in the frequent batch testing that was a requirement if he wanted to on-sell it. He now makes straight vegetable oil and runs his vehicles and machinery on that, as do many of his neighbouring farmers. It turned out to be a much easier and cheaper alternative to biodiesel. Companies like CAT make straight vegetable conversion kits that can be retrofitted to machinery like tractors and trucks. Did you have any comment on that?
Yeah, it's definitely feasible, we're finding, to convert. It's more difficult in a sense that you are retrofitting an existing asset with something else. So there's warranty issues, there's reliability issues that are a bit more risky. But we are definitely seeing more of a push towards using vegetable oils and waste oils in a more productive manner, whether it's directly in engines like this or through treating it and turning into biodiesel on farm. Selling it is going to be a long shot, as Liz mentioned, because of those compliance issues when you start selling as a product. But as I said, we're not too far off. We think it will be viable once there's a carbon price.
Thanks, Charles.
Well, good. Thanks again, Charles. It's another stunner.
No
Very
problem,
enjoyable. Very succinct and well done. Just quick questiony comment thing. The waste streams, it just keeps coming back into the poor old head of mine. Councils seem to be potentially a very significant player in this sort of sphere when you look at it. As you know, they've got sewage treatment plants, waste treatment plants, green waste, all that sort of stuff hanging around. Is that a reasonable sort of thought that we should be sort of angling towards encouraging councils to think along that way, or not?
Look, I think so. The first barrier for a lot of these, I mean, biogas aside, is to actually separating these wastes, because the fuel chemistries or production chemistries require quite good quality or good purity of waste. So you can't just have a mishmash of stuff and expect to make biodiesel out of it or bioethanol. Biogas is probably the exception because the bugs there like anything and everything. So that's probably the most viable in a community, in the council side of things. But if for example, there's a lot of municipalities in the US, for example, that goes around gathers fats from McDonald's and fast foods and things like that, and they turn that into biodiesel. That's perfectly feasible in our communities.
And Charles, we've had another question come through. Should industry be planning for a carbon price?
I would think we are already. A lot of industries and manufacturers are committing themselves to becoming carbon neutral. We see Lion did that sort of a couple of months ago, being a beer producer that's going to be carbon neutral. Their competitors are doing it. So I think regardless of what might happen politically, industry is moving towards that direction regardless.
Yep. Okay. And just a reminder that all these things, presentations in the day is sort of will be recorded and on the TOCO website. So Liz, if you disconnected yourself in the middle of the answer, you can pop back and have a look. Okay.